Hello guys, now welcome to my Beatles collection. Okay, now I have the first album that I'm showing you is Beatles 20 Éxitos de Oro, Spanish import, 20 golden hits. First album I ever bought of the Beatles and got it in Spain. Beatles, collection of Beatles oldies, British pressing, and I also have the pressing from Uruguayan pressing. Love songs by the Beatles, great double album. The Beatles, 20 greatest hits, with the 45 The Beatles Love Me Do that it came with. The Beatles double album Rock and Roll Music. The Beatles Rock and Roll Music Volume 1. The Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl. La Grande Storia del Rock. It's Birth of the Beatles. It's an Italian pressing, basically, of the Hamburg live sessions that they did when they went to Star Club. La Grande Storia del Rock. The Beatles Rarities, of course, you guys know it has the infamous Butcher cover inside. Some German songs, and the Beatles 67, 70. And also, of course, the Beatles 62, 66 in the red. Then we have Abbey Road. I'm just going randomly. Abbey Road, Let It Be. The Beatles again, if you want to call it that. White album, a little dirty, not too white. Great double album. Beatles Yellow Submarine, British import reissue of it. And of course I do have the Beatles Yellow Submarine original album, first pressing. Sgt. Pepper. This is the regular first pressing stereo Sgt. Pepper picture disc. Actually, there you go, it's the picture disc. Has the same thing on the back. This is the US version, if I'm not mistaken. Sgt. Pepper stereo with the inserts. And my crown jewel of my Beatles is the Sgt. Pepper Canadian mono first pressing album, which is this one right here, with the MAS. Stereo, Beatles, Sgt. Pepper again. Yes, I have quite a few Sgt. Peppers. Mono Sgt. Pepper US version. Not as great as the Canadian. The Canadian one is in near mint condition, sounds great. This is a US one. It's a little dusty. I've cleaned it up, but it's not in great condition. Now, going here, we have the bootleg that came out, which is a bootleg. It was the Alpha and Omega album that was sold on television. And actually, it was quickly withdrawn. So it's a quasi-bootleg. It's a counterfeit. It has the 4 albums of Beatles songs. Great album. Beatles, Alpha, Omega. It is the original songs, though. Great cover. Collectible. Magical Mystery Tour with the booklet, obviously. And I do have it repeated without the booklet. They're both first pressings, though. Whoa, what's that? The Beatles Yesterday and Today in stereo. Yeah. Okay, well that's the one. That's the crown jewel. Stereo, new and improved. Looks great. Great cover. Yep. Got it in stereo. Show you that it's the stereo version. Full dimensional stereo, and it's the Beatles cover. In the back, like the other one had. Yeah, then I have the trunk cover, obviously. The one, you know. This is a trunk cover. It has no V under Ringo's V-neck, so it's not a paste over cover. The Beatles' Greatest Hits is a Dutch import from Holland. Great album of the first few Beatles albums imported from Holland. Rubber Soul in mono, first pressing. Rubber Soul, mono again, first pressing. Beatles for Sale, mono, British reissue though, in the late 90s, if I'm not wrong, mid 90s. Beatles, in this case Revolver, stereo, first pressing. Beatles 6 in stereo, first pressing also. Okay. The Beatles Hottest Hits, Danish compilation, first pressing, came out in the mid 60s. Great album also. Beatles 65, yep, another one of the first pressings of the Beatles. The Beatles Help in stereo, first pressing. And yes, I do have the Beatles Help in mono, first pressing, which is this one right here. As you'll see the absence of stereo in the cover compared to the other one that says full dimensional stereo, and it is the mono version. So as you see, I have that. And then, to kind of switch it up with the Beatles, we have something new, stereo, the Beatles first pressing. The Beatles Mono, Hard Day's Night, also one of the beautiful British reissues that came out in the mid-90s. Love that one. Brilliant, but it's in mono. Parlophone label. The Beatles A Hard Day's Night, first pressing. And the Beatles' second album, first pressing in stereo. Great album. The Beatles Story 2 album, yes, it is the first pressing too. I always check this, the infamous TBO 2222, double album of interviews. The early Beatles has the first album in there, in the early Beatles stereo, first pressing. The Beatles Live at the BBC, British, double album. As you guys know, this is a great one. Got it for a couple of bucks when I used to work at Sam Goody. Introducing the Beatles by VJ, England's #1. One is an original introducing, the other one is a bootleg, if you want to call it that. Stereophonic. Please Please Me, the Beatles' first album, mono, British reissue on Parlophone label. I think I didn't have all the Beatles albums. Meet the Beatles. Meet the Beatles, of course, first album. This one is in mono, first US pressing. I have more of them. I'm going to go grab them and show you. I didn't get them all out. Happens, guys, it happens. Here we go. This is with the Beatles, mono, British pressing from the 90s. It's there, it's there. Then the original Meet the Beatles with the actual bag, stereo US pressing, says $4.98 on the cover. So even though it's open, it still has that plastic of the Meet the Beatles. Meet the Beatles again. This is a mono version of it. Also original first pressing in mono. Actually, songs, pictures, and stories of fabulous Beatles on VJ, the original one, because you know that the counterfeit one omits part of that title. This is songs and pictures and stories of the original Beatles on the VJ album. You know the first album was definitely milked by VJ. The Beatles featuring Tony Sheridan in the beginning, circa 1960, Polydor Records. This one, I think, is a German one, German import of Beatles songs in Hamburg, double LP. The Beatles, the Decca editions, I actually have this album. It's a British pressing, British import, of the 1962 Decca edition they did. As you can see, Pete Best is there with George, Paul, and John. It's a great album. Sounds pretty good. Recorded for Decca, obviously. The Beatles Live at the Star Club in Hamburg, double album, Pickwick. Yep, great album. Sound is pretty bad, but you guys know it's the Beatles. Think if it was with Ringo or with Pete Best, that one. Beatles featuring Tony Sheridan, Pickwick, British import, with, of course, My Bonnie, and as you guys know, recorded with Tony Sheridan. They were billed as the Beat Brothers. Okay, the Beatles' first live recordings with Ringo in Hamburg, Volume 1, not with Pete Best. We have another early edition of the Beatles' early years. Love that cover of John, Paul, Ringo, and George. The Beatles' early years, probably Hamburg and stuff like that. Beatle Talk. Funny album. You can't beat Beatle Talk. Interviews with the Beatles. The Beatles Psalm Book by the Holy Rich Strings, acoustic instrumental. Then we have The Beatle, A Time for God, which is a Pete Best band, basically, but it has with the picture of him when he was with the Beatles. It's a Pete Best band. There's Pete Best. And it says a Pete Best band. Good songs, though. Stars on 45, Stars on 45 long play. As you know, this has Beatles songs on it. It sounds pretty good. I think it's a Belgian or Dutch band doing pretty good renditions of Beatles songs. And, of course, the Chipmunks sing the Beatles, which is a great original first pressing album on Liberty Records. I love that one. The cover is classic, beautiful. A Hard Day's Night. Got this one. It's another one. It's by Wyncote Records. Stereo. It's kind of like a ripoff of the Chipmunks with All My Loving and I Love Her. Should Have Known Better, whatnot. All this in World War II is the original soundtrack, words and music by Lennon and McCarthy. You know, it's a double album with Elton John, Rod Stewart, people like that singing Beatles songs. And then, you know, you have like solo Beatles stuff like Paul McCartney, Pipes of Peace, Wings, Yes I Have Concert for Bangladesh. In the triple, I have All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. And on the run. So as you can see, it's a lot of Beatles albums. Basically, if you count everything, 70-some Beatles albums. Elvis a little bit more than that. So I hope you guys enjoyed my Beatle collection. Shout out once again to my bro Abe Sanchez and to Gary Gebler at Tracks on Wax Records in Catonsville. Peace out and enjoy.